Introduction, Mike, and welcome everybody. Obviously, we're covering a lot of topics today, so please do ask questions over the text at any point in time, and we're happy to stop and address that topic in as much depth as you want us to. Otherwise, I'll try and move fast enough to get to the end so that we can have kind of an open discussion about what technologies clients are using in the cloud today. With that, the agenda today is fairly basic. We wanted to make sure we did some housekeeping around talking about kind of what is enterprise class cloud and reviewing some of the buzzwords and or some of the terms out there and trying to quickly get to what are the real solutions that clients are buying in the market today. So we'll hit enterprise class cloud kind of as a definition, review some of the buzzwords, overview many of the kind of leading cloud solutions that clients are actually purchasing today with a discussion around kind of what's hot, and then we'll have an open forum of questions for people to have a conversation, and again, happy to go as in depth as you want to today. So enterprise class cloud, obviously there's a lot of cloud solutions in the market today, and a lot of people are confused. Part of that is because there are consumer-based offerings out there on things like Dropbox or Amazon or Google that sound like cloud solutions, but they're missing a lot of the traditional enterprise IT capabilities that we're all familiar with when we're building hardware-software solutions. So everything we're going to talk about today has enterprise class capability behind it. And some of the things that includes are Active Directory integration, behind the firewall and or behind the VPN integration. It's architected on enterprise class hardware and software solutions, the same hardware software products that you folks would be buying today within your own data center. We expect that cloud providers are building on those types of capabilities. It's built to satisfy any compliance and or security protocols, whether that's financial or HIPAA or any of those capabilities. Those are out there and they're available. Obviously, not every solution provider has them, but that's part of the challenge, is making sure you know that you're looking at the right enterprise class capability. We expect enterprise class providers to have customizable backup and DR SLAs, not just best effort, but we want solutions that clients can dictate those SLAs and manage them. And finally, support, 24/7, 365 customer support, the same type of SLAs that you're used to with your hardware software manufacturing partners, and even better SLAs is what we expect. So with that, obviously, as you guys want to ask questions along the way, the solutions we're going to be trying to talk about today should have all of these types of capabilities built in behind the scenes. Obviously, it may not show up in their solution website or their marketing docs, but that's what's out there, and that should dispel some of the concerns around all of the news around, oh, cloud is not secure, or cloud is not capable of compliance, or the things that we need. Those are all false rumors. It's just that you have to make sure you're looking at an enterprise class solution that has those capabilities. Some of the terms I want to make sure we hit today, obviously the big buzzwords, things like infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, the difference between private versus public and or hybrid, traditional cloud compute, cloud storage, cloud backup, cloud DR, and then some of the other hosted applications or capabilities that are quickly getting wrapped into the cloud industry, things like hosted Exchange, hosted VoIP, and or hosted desktop. So quickly around these terms, I put these kind of in a hierarchy of order. Software as a service, I think everyone's familiar with Salesforce as the easy example here, but the concept of any software as a service solution is that you log into one portal and have access to everything. You have no input nor requirements around what type of infrastructure it's built on. You just expect them to provide it for you as a service. Platform as a service is probably the least popular option within the cloud market right now, because it's really meant for application development and design. It's basically a wholly owned kind of platform of open source infrastructure that you can go design on. For the enterprise class clients out there, a majority of the activity in cloud right now is either around hosted applications or infrastructure as a service. Hosted applications, things like Exchange, SharePoint, archiving, VDI, are wholly owned, packaged up infrastructures in the cloud for that application, whereas infrastructure as a service is really when you want to go design the exact compute piece parts, same way that you would have designed it within your environment when you're buying hardware, software. You can design server or storage or backup or DR in basically on a cloud provider's assets. Any quick questions? Don't see anything. Okay. Private cloud versus public cloud. This is probably the next most confusing part of the cloud market right now, and part of that is good branding and good marketing by the traditional hardware providers out there, people like EMC and Cisco and VMware and NetApp. They jumped on the bandwagon quickly, and they call all of their current generation or next generation of hardware and software solutions, they call those private cloud. And that's a completely real market. Clients for many years now have been trying to virtualize their compute so that they can provide shared assets, whether that's shared server, shared storage, shared network assets to their end user applications within their environment. The biggest difference is that private cloud either sits within a client's own data center or within a co-location facility that they've acquired, they're managing. The original version of private cloud was just virtualized compute assets. The kind of next generation here is that a lot of the manufacturers have teamed up together to build block architectures, whether that's the V block or architecture similar. Basically the small, medium, large versions of pre-configured server, storage, network, backup infrastructure. It's supposed to have a single support model and supposed to have kind of proven architectures, up to 100 VMs, up to 500 VMs, 2,000 plus VMs, etc. On the public cloud side, the concept is very simple. It means that the provider manages the blinky lights of the boxes. And from there, they can manage as many layers up as you so choose. Within cloud, the public cloud world, you do have the option of choosing either dedicated compute, meaning getting servers, dedicated server or storage or network equipment dedicated specifically to your use case, or you can use shared compute where the provider has pre-bought large server storage environments and they're slicing it up based on your individual usage. Dedicated.
Ryan?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Mike. We do have a question that I wanted to kind of throw out there that's on this exact topic. The question is, with the private cloud, I guess you kind of addressed a little bit with the main manufacturers trying to market themselves as private cloud. What is the difference between a quote private cloud and having your own infrastructure?
Sure, there's really not, and that's one of the things that's confusing for clients in the market today as they try to look. Many clients are calling their own infrastructure private cloud because they are architecting in a way that they can share many VMs out of a single server or many applications out of a single storage device. So that is part of the confusion. There's nothing wrong with calling your environment private cloud, but in the true sense of the cloud definitions today, any cloud environment should be highly scalable, completely on demand and capable, and many clients are doing a great job of virtualizing and sharing out their existing assets, but they're not quite there yet with the kind of the portal scalability type capability within their own environment. But either way, there's no reason for clients that want to maintain control over their private cloud environments. There's no reason to stop virtualizing and leveraging all the next generation technologies. What I don't have on this slide is hybrid cloud because there's kind of endless definitions of it. But what we're seeing as a lot of activity in the market right now is people that are keeping some of their environment internal on their existing server storage assets, whether they're calling that private cloud or not, and then they're leveraging public cloud for other capabilities. So maybe they're keeping production server storage on site and production backup on site on their own assets, but they're replicating their backups off-site into a cloud provider, or they're replicating DR, or they're using a cloud provider for Exchange disaster recovery. So the easiest way to start is just to acknowledge that private implies that it's client-owned assets, public implies that it's a provider-owned asset, and that there's really any number of ways to mix and match the capabilities. The difference between them in the end is who's managing the blinky lights of the boxes, who's managing the refresh cycles of the hardware, and at any given layer you can trade admin rights to the other party, and that's what we see a lot of, is that clients leverage the public cloud provider for the physical server storage assets, but the client wants to manage the VMs, manage all the application layer on top of it, at which point it's kind of a mixed environment, if you will.
All right, well, thanks for that explanation, because I think that's probably, like you said, one of the most confusing pieces of the whole cloud atmosphere is this concept of private cloud and what the differences are between that and having your own, your own infrastructure. We actually see a lot of hybrid as well. Get an example of what you just said. We've got clients from whatever reason don't want to put Exchange necessarily in the cloud. They want to have it in their private cloud, if you will. But certainly from an anti-spam, antivirus, email archiving, that they're willing to put into the cloud because they don't want to have to deal with that piece of it, and it's an easy thing to put in the cloud. And that, that's a perfect example of hybrid. So I'll let you go on, but thanks for answering that question, because I think that's very confusing to most end users out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the follow-on point to that is that the manufacturing main providers out there, the big storage and server providers, they would love for everyone to throw away all of their existing server storage assets and go buy the new vBlock or vCore or whatever kind of pre-configured architecture, but obviously clients don't have the ability to throw away all of their existing server storage. It's on the depreciation books. It's part of their environment. So I think that's been part of the confusion, is that at first clients thought that they had to go buy the new complete vBlock architecture or whatever the right technology mix is to claim that they have private cloud, and you really don't. Really the question is much better served of which assets do you want to manage, and do you want to manage the financial refresh cycle of, versus which assets do you think you might get a better either cost or capability out of letting somebody else manage the blinky lights. So with that, I'm going to move on to some of these topics at just a high enough level to hit them, and I'll kind of talk to what's really going on with them. Cloud compute, it's got a lot of definitions: cloud server, cloud infrastructure as a service. It's all kind of the same market. But cloud compute simply means that you can go build whatever server storage environment that you so choose on either dedicated or shared infrastructure in a cloud provider's environment. Depending on the provider, you can dictate down to very, very finite detail exactly what type of build you want, how much memory, how much processing, whether you want shared storage, whether you need flash disk, fiber channel disk, SATA disk, any old disk. So really any limited or any capability that you want out there exists in the market. Obviously that carries different price points as you either use more dedicated or higher performance capability. But the benefit that clients see here is that they end up paying for used assets, not for pre-built assets. Obviously, the biggest benefit of VMware over the last 5 years has been that it allows clients to use 100% of their compute assets within their environment, or at least close enough to, maybe 60, 70, 80% based on design. In the cloud compute world, you get that capability because most of the billing models are set up that you only pay for your used compute. And obviously that's easier in the shared model than it is in the dedicated model. But that's what's driving a lot of the price reduction, is that you're not, instead of being 20, 30, 40% utilized like we may have been 5 years ago, you can quickly get to 80 to 100. In the storage environments, in cloud storage, which we'll hit next, that becomes even more apparent because most storage environments, by the time you apply RAID and all the different scenarios to the disk, you're losing, most people are sitting around only 30, 40% utilized. Within cloud compute, any of the layers that you would be able to put yourself behind a server storage environment, you can naturally put within the cloud environment, whether that's local snaps, local backups, off-site backup, and disaster recovery. You can custom build any type of firewall, load balancer, VPN capability that you so choose. So really there's no limitations here. But this, again, is where I go back to the difference between kind of the enterprise class cloud compute providers out there versus the kind of the upstart little guys, is that the enterprise class people will work with you to figure out whether you have an MPLS or a VPN network, what type of firewall capability you need. Do you need simple or do you need advanced capability? They'll basically custom build with you the same way that that you would have built hardware, software in your environment. Mike, any questions on this one?
None so far. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type them in.
So cloud storage is probably one of the more confusing markets out here, and there's good reasons for it. Simply put, cloud storage means that you're using a cloud provider's storage assets as a storage target. The question that everyone wants to understand right now is what is capable out there, because telecom network bandwidth is extremely limited from your ability to move large storage across a wire. That's why things like deduplication and WAN acceleration have been so popular over the last 5, 7, 10 years. And part of the cloud storage discussion is a good, you need to have a good use case discussion about your environment. A lot of people think that cloud storage is just the storage sitting behind cloud compute, meaning the SAN or NAS environment that's supporting all of those cloud servers. And that's really not true. That market exists, but we kind of view that as really just an extension of the cloud compute market. The market that's growing very, very rapidly right now is kind of the other cloud storage environments, things like file server in the cloud, backup in the cloud, archive in the cloud. What most clients realize kind of too late after they've already went and bought huge backup or deduplication or DR environments is that close to 80% of their total storage is really sitting in file, backup to disk, archive, kind of unstructured or very slow-moving fat disk that doesn't have a lot of activity on it. Because of that type of description, whether that's an archive or a traditional file server, etc., because it's not highly active, it's a great candidate to put that storage in the cloud because the change rate is obviously very small. And we know that storage is, the price of storage, while it continues to come down on a cost per gig model, it's still extremely expensive. And by the time you look at keeping a primary copy, a backup to disk copy, an offsite copy, a DR copy, you're potentially using, 4 or 5x the total storage. Then when you multiply that times only 30% utilized because you had to apply RAID and everything else to it, you really start to have an interesting conversation about how at somewhere between 15, 20 cents a gig in the cloud environment versus what you're paying is a very attractive discussion. I'll hit that one a little bit more, I think, yeah. So I'm going to hit cloud backup and cloud DR. cloud backup is in some ways an extension of cloud storage. But let me stop real quick. Mike, do we have any questions about cloud storage?
The only question that came across, honestly, is starting to talk about cloud backup. So
okay.
Why don't you go into that, and then if you don't address it, I'll unmute myself.
Let me hit that real quick. So, because it's kind of a common extension of the previous one. So, cloud backup is the same description I just described, which is it's obviously hard to push any large amount of data across the wire, or otherwise you have to spend a very large amount of money on very big telecom networks that just go underutilized, except for any time you're replicating. So that recipe has been challenging for clients for some time. So in the cloud backup world, there's multiple ways to solve the equation. So by no means is this a one-size-fits-all, and by no means are we implying that you can just go grab 5 terabytes in a cloud provider and just start replicating everything to it. You could do that, but your recovery would be quite challenged. So what we're seeing is a lot of the enterprise-class cloud providers are building APIs and hooks into the traditional backup software or backup hardware providers. People like Commvault, Symantec, NetBackup, Symantec Backup Exec, EMC Avamar, EMC Data Domain, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of clients are leveraging their existing spend that they've put into something like Commvault or Symantec or EMC, but they don't want to manage the secondary sites or the kind of the archive versions of those old backups, meaning the extra monthlies or yearlies or et cetera that they're keeping within that environment. So that's where a lot of clients are finding a much better cost model and use case to kind of use a hybrid version of keeping that capability on site so that they can get quick local recovery, which is really where most recovery ever happens. And then they also then get a kind of better cost model for their off-site backups or their off-site archives, et cetera. There's only a very select few enterprise-class providers in the market today that seem to understand these enterprise-class capabilities, and it's not the folks like Amazon or Google out there that have big, fat cloud shared storage environments. I'm talking about enterprise-class people that understand all of the same things, all the same complexities that you've been buying backup and replication software for over the last 5-10 years. They've built that capability in. They just realized that they're potentially a better target than you going to buy colo and routers and switches and servers and storage and backup to try and go put all that together.
Ryan, the question that we had, and I can probably just address it real quickly, is is when dealing with backup, obviously having stuff backed up is great, but the question is, what about recovery times when you're in the cloud as well? We work with lots of clients who have different return to operation type needs, and sometimes there's, as Ryan said, there's lots of ways to skin a cat in this space, and depending on the interview and finding out what the return to operations are, and including what are the recovery point objectives as well, there are different solutions that offer both on-site and off-site that you're protecting. In some respects, you're going to have a return to operations if a server goes down versus losing the entire data center, which is of course a much more unlikely thing to happen. And those are just things that come up in conversation. And as Ryan said, there's no one-size-fits-all, but different solutions have different capabilities, and so you just kind of have to determine, what your return operations need to be in what situations, and then just work with a solution to either customize it, or many solutions often have different, availability for that.
Mike, that was perfect. The other thing I'll add is one of the things we have on here is kind of a complete disaster recovery solution. We do have some cloud providers that are extending their service as an on-prem option as well, meaning they'll fund and deploy a backup appliance on-site within the client's environment. They'll handle the replication, deduplication, WAN acceleration, et cetera, back to their cloud environment where they have either offsite backup or disaster recovery capability. And they'll hook into your Active Directory. They'll work with you on any firewall security type discussions you need. So it becomes the kind of as a service concept here, disaster recovery as a service. To do that properly, to Mike's point, there are many recovery scenarios that you have to be able to recover on site if you want to have any type of a performance recovery, because over the wire, it's just simply you're trying to stick an elephant through a mouse hole. So to Mike's point, any good discussion right now in the market will address what those local recovery SLAs are, what the remote side disaster recovery SLAs are, and there's great ways to build solutions. It all depends on kind of what you want to retain control over versus what you're willing to let a provider retain control over. And then on top of that, there are some very good application-specific solutions out there, things that have kind of native disaster recovery hooks into Exchange or VMware or a lot of the traditional kind of leads out there, so that even if your Exchange server goes down, users can still transact mail via Outlook even while your Exchange server is down, because you basically have a caching server in the cloud that can handle live transactions for you. We have providers that have hooks into Veeam or a lot of the kind of next generation virtualization backup softwares out there. So lots of great ways. Clearly requires a partner to walk you through all that, and that's where Mike and his team are a perfect example to help you build the right design there.
And just to add one thing to that, what we found has been really interesting over the last probably 5 years that we've been doing these kind of offsite solutions, is that the pricing has really come down to the point where everyone's got budgets and it's always a challenge. But the fact of the matter is, like, what companies that only like Fortune 50 companies were buying even as early as 5-6 years ago is now like readily available at a price point that mid-sized firms and even smaller firms to some extent can take advantage of, which has really been interesting to see over such a short period of time, that technology come down to earth.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and move on, Mike. So in the application space, you clearly have the SAAS providers, and I think people know kind of who's out there, and that market is doing well. For any environment where you just want to let go and just use something purely as a service, that would be the software as a service market. The market that's similar but more kind of in line with the traditional IT world is the kind of hosted application market, things like hosted Exchange, hosted email archiving. Same concept as cloud compute, except the enterprise class providers in this game have pre-built environments that are optimized for that specific application. So pre-built hosted Exchange environments where they can dedicate or they can provide either dedicated or shared assets at any point in time, at any layer that you so choose. And the provider then handles high availability, disaster recovery, multi-site, basically active data center type concepts. That all exists even to the tune of 5,000 to 10,000 hosted Exchange users in the cloud with active data centers in the U.S. and Europe, serving that global footprint with archiving built in, with HA built in, and all the retention policies that you would expect to be able to deploy. So hosted Exchange is probably one of the hottest, if not the absolute hottest market that we see in the cloud world right now, especially in the mid-market space where clients just can't, they're spending money on consulting dollars, or they've got a lot invested in their people who are wearing too many hats and therefore don't have the time to stay kind of up to date with all the kind of day-to-day challenges that Exchange brings. So very hot market, a lot of capability out here in the enterprise space. Probably also one of the biggest markets that has a lot of wannabe type providers out there that think that they can provide enterprise class, but the moment you dig in, you realize that they don't have HA built into their solution. They can't really do DR between two sites. They can't provide different size mailboxes. They can't let you bring your own Exchange licenses, which many people are wrapped up into Microsoft agreements. The enterprise class guys will let you bring your Exchange licenses over, your BlackBerry licenses over. They'll mix and match with you to provide any layer that you want to at an enterprise class capability. So with that one, Mike, any questions? I think everyone understands the concept of hosted Exchange. I think people are generally confused on kind of what's out there from true enterprise class.
I have a couple of questions, but they're also about more like a backup and recovery. I don't know that we're going to answer them right here, but just to give you, just to address them in some way, shape, or form. The first one, and I'll kind of just put them both that are sort of similar. But one person wants to know about how quickly a laptop, for example, a sales user, could be restored back to fully operational. And then another, and actually it's the same person asking the second question, which is, in their environment, the hard drives and the laptops are all encrypted, so would like to know how recovery would work in that scenario as well.
Sure. We haven't seen a lot of activity in kind of that laptop market. That goes back to the old school technologies like Mozy and things like that. So a lot of that market is not really within the kind of infrastructure cloud market. That's more within those traditional software providers. And definitely anytime you're doing encryption, you have to wait for it to get unencrypted. So I don't have any facts or figures. It's a good one, Mike, for us to follow up with offline. But it's definitely a very real market for folks out there. It's just finding the right provider, but bandwidth can definitely be the limiting factor here, especially for remote users or people that are out and gone. What we're seeing a lot of is some activity around hosted VDI, so hosted virtual desktop, at which point the user could just pick up another device and log back into their environment. So that's one way to kind of accomplish the same concept without having to fight the bandwidth or the encryption recovery issues. The other that we're seeing a lot of is people moving their users' file share and Exchange environments into the cloud. So at which point they're taking a lot of the storage dependency that's on the device off of the device, at which point users, if they have access to their email and to their documents via any web portal, users can keep working, which provides time to go recover the asset. So I hope that's a good enough answer for right now, and definitely a good one to take offline. Mike?
Yep, I agree with that.
Cool. Let me switch. Let me go to hosted virtual desktop for a minute, then I'll come back to phone system just because we were already kind of on this topic. So virtual desktop has been a very intriguing technology for many years now, fairly mature between companies like VMware and Citrix from what their solution can do. The challenge is the use case that clients run into, meaning it's not perfect for all users, especially any road warriors that don't always have service or access to be online. So we've seen virtual desktop kind of get slowed down a little bit because it's not perfect for everybody, from clients deploying it within their own environment. The other thing that we've seen is that clients are usually very surprised at the infrastructure footprint that comes with virtual desktop. By the time you put 30, 50, 100,000 users onto one server storage environment, that they're hitting it all the time and dragging things in and out of it and kind of doing everything they do, I think it's just clients aren't always prepared. That storage was, as it was distributed across many PCs and little assets across the environment, the moment you centralize them, you give yourself a little bit of a network bottleneck and a server storage bottleneck. So that's kind of, all of that combined has made virtual desktop move a little bit slower than I think some clients had hoped it would. We're starting to see a lot of activity with kind of the desktop as a service or hosted VDI in the cloud market. The price points are moving around a little bit right now because the providers are trying to figure out what the right packages are, packaging up Office and a lot of the other, Oracle or SQL type capabilities that people need behind it. So the market continues to move here, and we think it's definitely a huge place of growth, and I think it's a good option for clients that have the right use case for those users. Mike, any questions on that one?
I think this also is a good, no questions, but I think this is a good time to also point out that when considering cloud for technology, or any technology at this point, But even, especially technologies that are, whether you know it or not, and some due diligence on what technologies have been kind of in the cloud for a while, like Exchange has been, versus a hosted VDI, which there are players making it work, but again, it's more of a newly tested type scenario, is something to definitely consider, because as a vendor comes in, obviously that's a non-agnostic type situation, and of course, anyone coming in to sell hosted VDI, they've got the best solution, and it's going to work 100% of the time, and you want to be very careful with that, especially when it comes to stuff that's really still being tweaked for, in most cases, performance.
Yep, completely agree, and I think that goes across all of these providers, or I guess all of these markets, is do your same due diligence that you would with your traditional hardware software manufacturers, and that's where Mike and his team can help you here, is knowing what they're built on is extremely important, because it's not like they're built on magic. They're built on the same hardware software solutions that exist for you to buy yourself today, and there's obviously limits and capability challenges with many different solutions out there, and VDI definitely requires a good design conversation before just buying the product. So with that, I'm going to flip back, I guess, to another market that's been quite hot for a while. This market's been fairly mature for close to 8 to 10 years now, and it's kind of a separate world, but I think people forget a lot that the phone system in the cloud is a very intriguing option. Simply, it just clients don't want the complexity of trying to figure out how to upgrade their old phone system that they've been hanging on to for dear life for the last 5, 7, 10 years. These days, people expect a lot more out of their kind of next generation of phone system. They want the ability to click to call. They want the find me, follow me. They want their voicemail sent to their email as a WAV file or as text. They want the ability to trade back and forth calls via their cell phone with their desk phone. They want 4-digit dialing across the enterprise. All of those capabilities are quite important to what companies want to do, but most of the time the IT team just doesn't get around to spending the time on the phone system, or they just don't want to spend the money. So we've seen a lot of activity, tons of activity in the mid-market space for people using hosted VoIP. Again, there's a big difference between the enterprise class providers out here versus kind of the telcos that just threw something together. So spend your time making sure you're looking at the right capability, but definitely a market that we expect to mature. What's driving a lot of it right now is all the Salesforce or CRM integrations that clients expect, and or their clients are tired of call center type capabilities, and all of that comes built in on a per user price now. So a lot of activity in that market. Mike, no questions?
Actually, there's a question I'm trying to figure it out. There's a question about finding a hard time finding a PBX in the cloud, enterprise-ready PBX in the cloud providers. That's probably something that we can discuss offline, because yes, it is difficult to find those kind of for large enterprises, but there certainly are out there. So and we're happy to take that offline if you care to.
Yeah, I guess the short answer is that we generally don't believe that most of the telecom providers' solutions are very enterprise class. We find them to be just good enough for kind of SMB, but not really enterprise ready. There are definitely a few enterprise class providers that understand how to design basically everything that you could in a Cisco or an Avaya world. But it does usually also require a network conversation around your existing MPLS or VPN environment for remote offices and how you're handling that, whether you want to manage that traffic or you want them to layer a network into that where they could provide SIP across those offices. So it's definitely a good conversation to have up front about what requirements are versus trying to just go shop, because you'll quickly knock most of the people off of the list. So put this together. By no means do I want anyone to hold us to it. It's just kind of a good building block for people to get an idea of what's out there. hosted exchange, $4 to $8 a month is where we see a lot of things starting. And as you add capabilities like archiving or 2 gig, 4 gig mailboxes on top of that, or HA with disaster recovery and things like that, the prices clearly go up, but they go up by a dollar or two per user. They don't go up in orders of magnitude. Cloud compute's probably the hardest one on here to give you an estimated number, because it's clearly all built on how much memory, how much processing, and how much storage you need for that application environment. But I mean, simple web servers and things like that are very inexpensive in the cloud. But it's not as easy as just smacking a server or two. It's usually a much larger design conversation around what the client's trying to do. Cloud storage, simply as a target or as a file storage environment, 15 to 20 cents a gig is kind of the starting point. If you get up into the orders of magnitude of hundreds of terabytes plus, those numbers can come down to 10, 12 cents a gig, give or take. But it's the use case discussion that matters first around what are we trying to layer in here. Is this production in the production storage in the cloud? Is this a secondary target? How are we managing in and out? Do we have deduplication and lane acceleration built in? Those are the questions that people want to be talking about first. It doesn't necessarily change the price point in the cloud storage component. What it changes is what type of hybrid design we need to integrate with the existing backup software environment, backup hardware environment, WAN acceleration device, or the appliance that's moving data in and out. It's more the broker that carries an additional cost than it is the actual cloud storage. The good news is that many clients have those brokers or those software hardware environments already. They just don't realize that it's pre-integrated with a cloud provider that they could be using today. Cloud backup, kind of a hard market to discuss here, because the cloud backup versus replication and DR in the cloud market is a very mixed conversation. This one I'll just kind of leave to Mike and team to let you guys walk through what solutions are out there. It can be as low as the cloud storage market if you're just sending off-site backups out there, but the moment you try to build in more capability, obviously there's a cost between that those integrated backup or software type capabilities. Cloud DR, the kind of DR as a service concept, is there's only a few providers in this game today, but we expect that to grow quite rapidly. As an example, one of them can provide a backup appliance on site for up to 5 terabytes and up to 20 virtual machines. They'll replicate that appliance into their cloud with the appropriate cloud storage, cloud server, cloud everything environment. And they'll manage all of the SLAs, 15-minute recovery on site, and I think 2-hour full disaster recovery SLAs for everything all included for $25,000 a year. Obviously, that's kind of a building block starting point. That environment can quickly go up to 10, 20, 50 terabytes, et cetera. But it just gives you a kind of a sample starting point that if you wanted to get out of the backup and DR business altogether, you could get that for as low as $25,000 a year. Hosted virtual desktop, like Mike said, you have to really understand what people are built on and how they're built. So we're seeing solutions starting as low as $30, $40 a month. But usually by the time you package everything up, get the complete Microsoft Office package and everything else that you expect in there, that price point usually quickly gets quite a bit higher, somewhere around the 80 to 120 range per month. And hosted VoIP, the kind of enterprise class phone system, all the features that I mentioned previously, comes in usually, $30 to $40 a month is kind of the range there. We see it as low as 25, but usually there's a catch when you're getting that low, and some of this depends on whether we're talking about 15 to 25 users versus 50 to 500 users. That obviously some of the costs get spread out, because most of the enterprise class hosted VoIP providers are providing connectivity to your site. So they have to share that cost across the user, so that's part of where that number comes down. So with that, I think that was kind of the majority of the high-level stuff we wanted to get through. I know we're close to the end of the time here. So Mike, do we have any more open questions? Obviously, Mike and team are completely available to you guys to follow up, sit down, and have deeper conversations on any of these topics.
There are no other further questions. There were a couple of people that had asked if the presentation we made available. We are recording the presentation, so we will have it available at some point on our website. We can send it out. If you'd like a copy of it beforehand, before we get a chance to get this recorded copy put together, we're happy to send something out. Why don't you, I don't know, do you have a slide, Ryan, with any of our contact information on there or not?
Mike, it's not in here, so if you want to provide that right now for anyone.
Let me do that really quickly. Why don't we just start by, I'll have it just sent to sales@bdtcorp.com. If you'd like this presentation sent to you, send us an email there, and if you have any follow-up as well, certainly that's a good place to start, or with the account manager who invited you to the meeting, of course, is a good place to start. I'm looking to see if there's any other questions here. I don't see any other questions. If anyone else has anything, I'll wait here for another minute to see if anything comes through as far as questions. Otherwise, I appreciate everyone coming, and hopefully there was good value in you guys being on here. And again, as far as that sales email, happy to take feedback on this event as well. We always want to improve on these. So if you're willing to take some time to send us an email, hey, this was great, or hey, I would have really expected this, we're totally open to constructive criticism on these as well, and we appreciate it actually. So thanks again. I don't see any other questions, so I guess we'll just end the webinar right here. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, everybody.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye. Muted.